Welcome to my little corner of the internet, where we celebrate creativity and growth. Welcome, friends, to our video dedicated to history of Lebanon under Ottoman rule. Let's dive right in and uncover its wonders. The Ottoman Empire at least nominally ruled Mount Lebanon from its conquest in 1516 until the end of World War I in 1918. The Ottoman Sultan, Selim I, invaded Syria and Lebanon in 1516. The Ottomans, through the Maans, a great Druze feudal family, and the Shihabs, a Sunni Muslim family that had converted to Christianity, ruled Lebanon until the middle of the 19th century. Ottoman administration, however, was only effective in urban areas, while most of the country was ruled by tribal chieftains, based largely on their ability to collect taxes for the sultan. The system of administration in Lebanon during this period is best described by the Arabic word iqta, which refers to a political system similar to other feudal societies, composed of autonomous feudal families that were subservient to the emir, who himself was nominally loyal to the sultan. Therefore, allegiance depended heavily upon personal loyalty. The Ottoman Empire also provided minority religious communities autonomy through the millet system to the extent that they could regulate themselves, while recognizing the supremacy of the Ottoman administration. It was precisely this power structure, made up of fiefdoms, that allowed Bashir II, an emir from the Shihab dynasty in the Druze and Maronite districts of Mount Lebanon, to gain lordship over Mount Lebanon in Ottoman Syria during the first part of the 19th century. It was during this period that Bashir I became an ally of Muhammad Ali, who tried to secure Egyptian rule in Mount Lebanon. This was also a period that saw increasing class and sectarian antagonisms that would define Lebanese social and political life for decades to come. The partition of Mount Lebanon into Maronite and Druze provinces raised animosities between the different sects, backed by European powers. This ultimately culminated in the 1860 massacre. After these events, an international commission of France, Britain, Austria, and Prussia intervened. The Ottoman Empire implemented administrative and judicial changes. Moving ahead, let's uncover the hidden gems within Ottoman rule 1516-1918 and discover their significance. The Ottoman Empire was marked by diversity in which communities lived parallel lives. Religious affiliation proved to be a cornerstone in the way the Ottoman state designated and discriminated between its people. The superiority of Islam played a central role in imperial ideology, but this was not a central tenet of what it meant to be Ottoman. Instead, a central tenet of subjects was to subordinate to the House of Osman. The important aspect of chieftains was their ability to collect taxes for the empire. This administration is also referred to as iqta, meaning that autonomous feudal families served the emir, who in turn served the sultan in Istanbul. Personal loyalty played an important role in this allegiance. The House of Osman regarded the absolute sovereignty of the Ottoman ruler as crucial to maintain an empire that included many different communities. These communities included, among others, Ashkenazi, Syrians, Maronites, Copts, Armenians, and Jews. These communities had to obey the Ottoman fiscal system. In return, they received religious and civil autonomy. However, in society it was evident that Islamic law and control were dominant. Christians and Jews were considered dhimmis, meaning they were perceived as inferior, but also non-Muslim and safeguarded. They were referred to as the people of the book. Although discrimination was pervasive in the empire, non-Muslim communities went to court for legal issues and were subsequently motivated to establish themselves as self-determining communities. This millet legal system was an integral part of the empire and sustained Ottoman imperial rule over diverse peoples through legal protection of autonomous confessional communities. Until the 19th century, different communities were not explicitly tied to political belonging. In the next phase, we'll be immersing ourselves in the realm of Ottoman conquest and exploring its real-world applications. The Ottoman Sultan, Selim I, after defeating the Safavids, conquered the Mamluks of Egypt. His troops, invading Syria, destroyed Mamluk resistance in 1516 at the Battle of Marj Dabik, north of Aleppo. As we venture forward, let's take a closer look at Maan family rule and its impact on our understanding. Following the Ottoman conquest, the Chalf was administratively divided into 3 Nayas subdistricts of the Sidon Beirut Sanjak, which was a district of the Damascus Eyalet. The Chalf subdistricts, along with the subdistricts of Garb, Jerd and Matan, were predominantly populated by Druze at the time and collectively referred to as the Druze Mountain. The Ottoman Sultan Selim I, after entering Damascus and receiving the defection of its Mamluk governor Jamberdi al-Ghazali, who was kept in his post, showed preference to the Turkmen Asaf clan, the Kesawan-based enemies of the Musnid's Butterid allies. He entrusted the Asafs with political authority or tax farming rights in the subdistricts between Beirut and Tripoli, north of the Druze mountain. The Butterid emir Jamal al-Din Haji did not give allegiance to Selim in Damascus, and after discarding an Ottoman call to arms in 1518, he was imprisoned. The son of the Musnid emir Yunus, was summoned and confirmed by Selim in Damascus as the chief of the Chalf in 1517, according to the 17th historian and Maronite patriarch Istefan al-Duway. Ibn Sabat does not mention any Musnid being received by the Sultan in Damascus, but noted that the Musnid emirs Am al-Din Sulayman and Zayn al-Din were all arrested by Jamberdi al-Ghazali in 1518 and transferred to the custody of Selim, who released them after a heavy fine for supporting the rebellion of the Bedouin Banu al-Hansh emirs in Sidon and the Bekaa Valley. The 3 Musnids likely shared the chieftainship of the Chalf, though the length and nature of the arrangement is not known. Zayn al-Din is assumed by the modern historian Abdul Rahim Abu Hussein to be the Zayn ibn Man mentioned in an Ottoman register as the owner of a dilapidated waytamel with 2 millstones in 1543, while Ibn Tulan's reference to a part of the Chalf as Shaf Sulayman ibn Man in 1523 likely refers to Am al-Din Sulayman. Neither Zayn nor Sulayman are mentioned by later chroniclers of the Musnids, likely for political reasons related to the chronicler's association to the Musnid line of Qurqmas. The latter was based in the Chalf village of Barak, where he gave refuge to members of the Safer family after their flight from Akka in 1528. Qurqmas's establishment in Barak instead of his predecessor's apparent seat in Dar al-Kama may have been related to a conflict with Alam al-Din Sulayman, who may have controlled Dar al-Kama at the time, or a division of the Chalf between the Musnid chieftains. In 1523, 43 villages in Shaf Sulayman ibn Man, including Barak, were burned by the forces of the Damascus governor Kiram Pasha for tax arrears and Musnid disobedience, and the governor's forces sent back to Damascus for cartloads of Druze heads and religious texts in the aftermath of the campaign. According to Harris, such brutality entrenched resistance, and in the following year Druze fighters killed Subash's provincial officials appointed by Kiram Pasha to administer Mount Lebanon's subdistricts, prompting another government expedition against the Chalf, which returned 3 cartloads of Druze heads and 300 women and children as captives. The death of Jamal al-Din Haji in prison in 1521 and the Ottoman expeditions led the Butterids to accept Musnid precedence over the Druze of southern Mount Lebanon. In 1545, the leading emir of the Druze, Yunus Man, was lured to Damascus and executed by the authorities under unclear circumstances, but suggesting continued insubordination by the Druze under Musnid leadership. Following the death of Yunus, the Druze moved to import from the Venetians long-range muskets superior to those employed by the Ottomans. In 1565, the new arms were put to use by the Druze in an ambush on Ottoman Sipahi thief-holding cavalries in Ain Dera in the Jerd sent to collect taxes from southern Mount Lebanon. For the next 20 years, the Druze successfully beat back government attempts to collect taxes and confiscate weapons, while increasing their rifle arsenals. In 1585, the imperial authorities organized a much larger campaign against the Chalf and the Sidon Beirut Sanjak in general, led by the Bilabi provincial governor of Egypt, Ibrahim Pasha. It ended in a decisive government victory, the confiscation of thousands of rifles and the collection of tax arrears, which had been accruing for decades, in the form of currency or property. The most important leader in the Chowf at the time was a Musnid emir named Qutmaz, possibly the son of Yunus. The modern historian Muhammad Adnan Bakit holds this Yunus was likely the head of the Musnids at the time. A Musnid chief named Yunus was recorded by the contemporary poet Muhammad ibn Mami al-Rumi to have been captured and hanged by the Ottomans at an undefined date as a result of unspecified complaints by the Qadi head judge of Sidon to the Sublime Porte, and possibly the grandson of the above-mentioned Qutmaz. He had likely been the chieftain of the specific area of the Chowf referred to as Shaf ibn Man, a sub-district mentioned in Ottoman government documents from 1523, 1530, 1543 and 1576. His preeminence among the Musnids was possibly the result of the natural deaths or eliminations of the other Musnid chiefs. Like his father, Qutmaz was a multazam tax farmer in the Chowf, though he resided in Ain Dera and was recognized as a mudim of the Druze, his title of emir being used by local historians as a traditional honor rather than an official rank. Qutmaz had refused to submit to Ibrahim Pasha and escaped the Chowf and died soon after in hiding, according to the Maronite patriarch and historian Isfahn al-Duwayhi. Qutmaz was killed during a government expedition against the Chowf in 1585, precipitated by Qutmaz's alleged orchestration of an attack the preceding year on a government convoy in Mecca that had been transporting the annual Egyptian tribute destined for the Sultan in Constantinople. The aftermath of the campaign and the death of Qutmaz left the Druze mountain in an anarchic state marked by internal fighting among the Druze. In the upcoming section, we'll be shining a light on control of Sidon, Beirut and Suft Sanjaks. Around 1590, Qutmaz was succeeded by his eldest son Fakhr al-Din II as the mudim of all or part of the Chowf. Unlike his Musnid predecessors, Fakhr al-Din cooperated with the Ottomans, who, though able to suppress Mount Lebanon's local chiefs with massive force, were unable to pacify the region in the long term without local support. When the veteran General Murad Pasha was appointed Bilabi of Damascus, Fakhr al-Din hosted and gave him expensive gifts upon his arrival to Sidon in September 1593. Murad Pasha reciprocated by appointing him the Sanjak Bey district governor, called Emir Liwa in Arabic sources, of Sidon, Beirut in December. The Ottomans' preoccupation with the wars against Safavid Iran and the war with Habsburg Austria afforded Fakhr al-Din the space to consolidate and expand his semi-autonomous power. In July 1602, after his political patron Murad Pasha became a vizier in Constantinople, Fakhr al-Din was appointed the Sanjak Bey of Suft. With the Druze of Sidon, Beirut and Suft under his authority, he effectively became their paramount chief. Fakhr al-Din may have been appointed to the post to leverage his Druze power base against the Shia. In 1606, Fakhr al-Din made common cause with the Kurdish rebel Ali Janduid of Aleppo against his local rival Yusuf Saifo of Tripoli. The latter had been invested as commander-in-chief of the Ottoman armies in the Levant to suppress Janduid. Fakhr al-Din may have been motivated by his ambitions of regional autonomy, defense of his territory from Saifo, or expanding his control to Beirut and Kesawan, both held by Saifo. The rebel allies besieged Saifo in Damascus, eventually forcing his flight. In the course of the fighting, Fakhr al-Din took over the Kesawan. When Jamdulid was defeated by the Ottomans, Fakhr al-Din appeased Murad Pasha, who had since become Grand Vizier, with substantial sums of cash and goods. A high amount is an indicator of the man's wealth. Fakhr al-Din was kept as Sanjak Bey of Suft. His son Ali was appointed as Sanjak Bey of Sidon, Beirut, and the Maans' control of Kesawan was recognized by the Porte. With that being said, let's now move on to interregnum of Yunus and Ali. Fakhr al-Din lost imperial favor with the death of Murad Pasha in July 1611 and the succession of Nash Pasha. Then the Porte, freed up from the wars with Austria and Iran and the Jalali revolts in Anatolia, had turned its attention to affairs in the Levant. The authorities had become wary of Fakhr al-Din's expanding territory, his alliance with Grand Duchy of Tuscany, his unsanctioned strengthening and garrisoning of fortresses, and his employment of outlawed sekbans. Nash Pasha appointed Ahmed Pasha, the governor of Damascus, at the head of a large army to suppress Fakhr al-Din. The latter boarded a European ship and escaped to Livorno, Tuscany. In Fakhr al-Din's absence, his younger brother Yunus acted as head of the family in the Chauf. The Maans Sekbans stationed in their headquarter village of Dar al-Kama collaborated with Ahmed Pasha, prompting Yunus to abandon the village for Botline. Ali Man, meanwhile, was deserted by his bodyguard of Sekbans in Mafraq in the Syrian desert, where he evaded Ahmed Pasha. The Musnid fortresses of Shakf Anan and Subayba, which the Ottomans sought to dismantle, were controlled by the families Sekbans led by Hussein Yazgi and Hussein Tall, respectively. With the help of the rival Harfush dynasty of Bolbek, the Sekban commanders arranged the two fortresses' demolition and were rewarded by the authorities. The Maans were stripped of their governorships of Sidon, Beirut, Suft, and Kesawan, but Yunus retained the tax farm of the Chauf from the governor of the newly created Sidon Islet in 1614. Their Druze and Shia rivals re-emerged as the tax farmers and governors of their home districts in Mount Lebanon and Jabal Amal. Although the Maans' position was severely weakened, in 1615 political circumstances changed in their favor, with Nash Pasha being executed, Ahmed Pasha being replaced by a friendly governor, the Sidon Islet being dissolved, and troops being withdrawn from Syria to fight on the Iranian front. Yunus and Ali were appointed to Suft and Sidon Beirut, respectively, and shortly after both governorships were given to Ali. The Maans then confronted their Druze rivals, namely Muzaffar al-Andari of the Jerd, the Arslan chief Muhammad ibn Jamal al-Din of Chuifat in the Garb, and the Sawas of Chbanai in the Matan. Ali and Yunus defeated them in 4 engagements in the Druze mountain, at Imid, Ain Dera, Abi and the Spring of Naim on the coast south of Beirut. In the course of the fighting, they retook control of Beirut and the Kesawan. Afterward, Ali awarded the Maans Tanukid allies and relatives the tax farms of Beirut, the Garb and the Jerd, and the Abul Lama family the tax farm of the Matan. Growing opposition to the Maans by the Shias of Suft Sanjak culminated with their backing of Yazgi's efforts to replace Ali as Sanjak Bey there and their alliance with the Harfushis in. Yazgi was killed almost immediately after taking up office in Suft in June 1618, and Ali was restored to the post. Meanwhile, tensions rose between the Maans and their Tanukid and Abul Lama allies relating to property disputes in Beirut. Without wasting any more time, let's jump into the fascinating world of peak of power. The Ottomans pardoned Fakhr al-Din and he returned to Mount Lebanon, arriving in Acre on 29 September 1618. Upon hearing of his return, the Maans Druze allies immediately reconciled with Ali, and from that point there was no further active Druze opposition to Fakhr al-Din. Uneasy about the growing ties between the Harfushis and the Shia chiefs of Suft, he arrested the preeminent chief of the Shia in Jabal Amal, Ali Munka, and released him after a ransom paid by Yunus al-Harfush. He moved to supervise the collection of taxes in Bilad Bishara in December, prompting the Shia notable families of Ali Saga, Munka, Shukra and Dagger to take refuge with Yunus al-Harfush and evade payment. Fakhr al-Din responded by destroying their homes. He then reconciled with the Jabal Amal chiefs, and Shia levies thereafter joined his army in his later military campaigns. Fakhr al-Din moved against the Saifis in 1619, capturing and looted their stronghold of Hiznaka, and 4 days later besieging Yusuf and the latter's Druze allies in the Krek de Chevaliers. He then sent a detachment to burn the Saifis' home village of Akka and gained the defection of the Saifir forts of Byblos and Smaj Bel. Fakhr al-Din was compelled by Ottoman pressure to lift the siege, but during the hostilities had gained control of the Byblos and Batraun Neyers. Yusuf was dismissed in 1622 after failing to remit taxes to the port, but refused to hand over power to his replacement Umakitanji, who in turn requested Fakhr al-Din's military support. Fakhr al-Din complied in return for the ilsism of the Tripoli Neyers of Dinai, Sheri and Akka. Once Fakhr al-Din set out from Gaza, Yusuf abandoned Tripoli for Akka. The emir thereafter sent his Maronite ally Abu Safi Kazan, the brother of his Mudaba fiscal and political advisor, scribe Abu Nader Kazan, to occupy Maronite-populated Sheri. thereby ending the rule of the local Maronite Mudems established since the late 14th century. In 1623, Fakhr al-Din mobilized his forces in Bsheri in support of Yusuf's rebellious nephew Suleiman, who controlled Safita. Fakhr al-Din's intervention confirmed the Maans as the practical overlords of Safita. In August-September 1623, Fakhr al-Din evicted the Harfushis from the southern Bekaa village of Kabylias for their prohibition on the Chalf Druze from cultivating their fields there. Meanwhile, in June, the Porte had replaced Oliman as Sanjak Bey of Suft with a certain Bustanji Bashi and replaced his brother Hussein and the Man loyalist Mustafa Kethua as the Sanjak Beys of Ajlan and Nablus with local opponents of the Maans. The Porte soon after restored the Maans to Ajlan and Nablus, but not to Suft. The Maans thereupon moved to assume control of Ajlan and Nablus. Fakhr al-Din launched a campaign against the Tourbais and Foruks in northern Palestine, but was defeated in a battle at the Oyer River near Ramla. On his way back to Mount Lebanon from the abortive Palestine campaign, Fakhr al-Din was notified that the Porte reappointed his sons and allies to Suft, Ajlan and Nablus. The governor of Damascus, Mustafa Pasha, backed by the Harfushis and Safas, nonetheless proceeded to launch an expedition against the Maans. Fakhr al-Din routed the Damashq force at Anja and captured Mustafa Pasha. Fakhr al-Din extracted from the Bailabi confirmation of the Maans governorships and the additional appointments of himself over Gaza Sanjak, his son Mansa over Lijan Sanjak, and Ali over the southern Bekaa. The appointments to Gaza, Nablus and Lijan were not implemented due to the opposition of local powerholders. Fakhr al-Din plundered Baalbek soon after Anja and captured and destroyed its citadel on 28 March. Yunus al-Harfush was executed in 1625, the same year that Fakhr al-Din gained the governorship of the Baalbek Niya. By 1624, Fakhr al-Din and his allies among the Safas who defected from Yusuf was in control of most of the Tripoli Islet, except for Tripoli city, the Krakdi Chevaliers, the Koraniya, and the Jabal Sanjak. A few months after Yusuf's death in July 1625, Fakhr al-Din launched an assault against Tripoli. He forced out his old ally Suleiman's Safa from the Safita fortress and was later ceded the fortresses of Krakdi Chevaliers and Markab by Yusuf's sons. In September 1626 he captured the fortress of Selim I, followed by Homer and Homs, appointing his deputies to govern them. Fakhr al-Din was appointed Bailabi of Tripoli in 1627, according solely to Duway. Either early as Fakhr al-Din captured many places around Damascus, controlled 30 fortresses, commanded a large army of Sekbans, and, according to a contemporary Ottoman historian, the only thing left for him to do was to claim the Sultanate. Now, let's redirect our focus towards demise and discover its significance in our narrative. The imperial government appointed Kachuk Ahmed Pasha as governor of Damascus and fitted him with a large army to destroy Musnid power. Kachuk first defeated and killed Ali near Konhasbaya in Wadi al-Taim. Fakhr al-Din and his men subsequently took refuge in a cave in Niha in the southern Chauf or further south in Jetsin. To smoke them out of their hiding places, Kachuk started fires around the mountains. Fakhr al-Din consequently surrendered. His sons Mansa and Hussein, the latter of whom was stationed in Markab, had already been captured by Kachuk. His sons Hassan, Haydar, and Bullock, his brother Yunus and nephew Hanan ibn Yunus were all executed by Kachuk during the expedition. Fakhr al-Din was imprisoned in Constantinople and he and his son Mansa were executed in 1635 on the orders of Murad IV. Now, let's redirect our focus towards later emirs and discover its significance in our narrative. The Druze enemy of the Maans, Ali Alam al-Din, was given authority over the Chauf by the Ottomans. A surviving member of the dynasty, Mulim Man, the son of Yunus and nephew of Fakhr al-Din, had evaded capture and led the Druze opposition to Alam al-Din, defeating him in a battle and forcing his flight to Damascus in 1635. Alam al-Din soon after defeated Mulim in the Bekaa Valley, but Mulim finally drove him out of the Chauf in 1636. The people of the Druze mountain mostly backed him. In 1642 he was appointed by the Ottomans the multazim of the Chauf, Gerd, Garb, and Mat, a position he largely held until 1657. Following Mullum's death, his sons Ahmad and Ququas entered into a power struggle with Ottoman-backed Druze leaders. In 1660, the Ottoman Empire moved to reorganize the region, placing the Sanjaks districts of Sidon, Beirut, and Sift in a newly formed province of Sidon, a move seen by local Druze as an attempt to assert control. Contemporary historian Istefan al-Duwayy reports that Ququas was killed in act of treachery by the Bilabi of Damascus in 1662. Ahmad, however, escaped and eventually emerged victorious in the power struggle among the Druze in 1667, but the Maans lost control of Safed and retreated to controlling the Iltizam of the Shaf Mountains and Kisrawan. Ahmad continued as local ruler through his death from natural causes, without heir, in 1697. During the Ottoman-Habsburg War, Ahmad Man collaborated in a rebellion against the Ottomans which extended beyond his death. Iltizam rights in Chauf and Kisrawan passed to the rising Shihab family through female line inheritance. In the upcoming section, we'll be dissecting Regency of Bashir I and exploring its intricate connections to our topic. When Emir Ahmad Man died without a male heir in 1697, the sheikhs of the Qaisi Druze faction of Mount Lebanon, including the Jumblat clan, convened in Semkanai and chose Bashir Shihab I to succeed Ahmad as Emir of Mountain Lebanon. Bashir was related to the Maans through his mother, who was the sister of Ahmad Man and the wife of Bashir's father, Hussein Shihab. Due to the influence of Hussein Man, the youngest of Fakhr ad-Din's sons, who was a high-ranking official in the Ottoman imperial government, the Ottoman authorities declined to confirm Bashir's authority over the tax farms of Mount Lebanon. Hussein Man forsake his hereditary claim to the Man Emirate in favor of his career as the Ottoman ambassador to India. Instead, the Ottoman authorities appointed Hussein Man's choice, Haydar Shihab, the son of Musa Shihab and Ahmad Man's daughter. Haydar's appointment was confirmed by the governor of Sidon and agreed upon by the Druze sheikhs, but because Haydar was still a minor, Bashir was kept on as regent. The transfer of the Man Emirate to the Shihabs made the family's chief the holder of a large tax farm that included the Chauf, Garb, Mat and Kesawan areas of Mount Lebanon. However, the tax farm was not owned by the Shihabi emir and was subject to annual renewal by the Ottoman authorities, who made the ultimate decision to confirm the existing holder or assign the tax farm to another holder, often another Shihab emir or a member of the rival Al-Am al-Din clan. The Qaisi Druze were motivated to appoint the Shihabs because the Wadi al-Tain-based Shihabs were not involved in the intertribal machinations of the Chauf, their military strength, and their marital ties to the Maans. Other clans, including the Druze Jumblats and the Maronite Khazans, were subsidiary tax farmers, known as mutajis, who paid the Ottoman government via the Shihabs. A branch of the Shihab family continued to control Wadi al-Taim, while the Shihabs in Mount Lebanon made Dar al-Kama their headquarters. The Shihab emir was also formally at the military service of the Ottoman authorities and was required to mobilize forces upon request. The Shihabs' new status made them the preeminent social, fiscal, military, judicial and political power in Mount Lebanon. In 1698, Bashir gave protection to the Hamid sheikhs when they were sought out by the authorities and successfully mediated between the two sides. He also captured the rebel Mushrif ibn Ali al-Saga, sheikh of the Shia Muslim Whale clan of Bilad Bishai in Jabal Amal, modern South Lebanon, and delivered him and his partisans to the governor of Sidon, who requested Bashir's assistance in the matter. As a result, Bashir was officially endowed with responsibility for the safekeeping of Sidon province between the region of Safed to Kesawan. At the turn of the 18th century, the new governor of Sidon, Arslan Matarsi Pasha, continued the good relationship with Bashir, who by then had appointed a fellow Sunni Muslim Qaisi, Umar al-Zaydani, as the subsidiary tax farmer of Safed. He also secured the allegiance of the Shia Muslim Munka and Suzb clans to the Qaisi faction. Bashir was poisoned and died in 1705. The 17th Maronite patriarch and historian, Istefan al-Duwayy, asserts Haydar, who had since reached adulthood, was responsible for Basha's death. Now, let's dig deeper into reign of Haydar and unveil the hidden treasures it holds within. Emir Haydar's coming to power brought about an immediate effort on the part of Sidon's governor, Bashir Pasha, a relative of Sultan Mehmed Pasha, to roll back Shihab authority in the province. To that end, the governor directly appointed Zahir al-Yuma, Yuma al-Zaydani's son, as the tax farmer of Safed, and directly appointed members of the Whale, Munka and Sob clans as tax farmers of Jabal Amal's sub-districts. The latter two clans thereafter joined the Wales and their pro-Yamani faction. The situation worsened for Emir Haydar when he was ousted by the order of Bashir Pasha and replaced with his Chaufi Druze enforcer turned enemy, Mahmud Bihar in 1709. Emir Haydar and his Qazi allies then fled to the Kesawini village of Gaza, where they were given protection by the Maronite Hubeish clan, while Mount Lebanon was overrun by a Yamani coalition led by the al-Din clan. Emir Haydar fled further north to Hermel when Bihar forces pursued him to Gaza, which was plundered. In 1711, the Qazi Druze clans mobilized to restore their predominance in Mount Lebanon, and invited Emir Haydar to return and lead their forces. Emir Haydar and the Abul Lama family mobilized at Ras al-Mat and were joined by the Jumblat, Tawhak, Naked and Abd al-Malik clans, while the Yamani faction led by Bihar mobilized at Ain Dara. The Yaman received backing from the governors of Damascus and Sidon, but before the governors' forces joined the Yaman to launch a pincer attack against the Qazi camp at Ras al-Mat, Emir Haydar launched a preemptive assault against Ain Dara. In the ensuing Battle of Ain Dara, the Yamani forces were routed, the al-Din sheikhs were slain, Bihar was captured, and the Ottoman governors withdrew their forces from Mount Lebanon. Emir Haydar's victory consolidated Shihab political power, and the Yamani Druze were eliminated as a rival force. They were forced to leave Mount Lebanon for the Hauran. Emir Haydar confirmed his Qazi allies as the tax farmers of Mount Lebanon's tax districts. His victory in Ain Dara also contributed to the rise of the Maronite population in the area, as the newcomers from Tripoli's hinterland replaced the Yamani Druze and Druze numbers decreased due to the Yamani exodus. Thus, an increasing number of Maronite peasants became tenants of the mostly Druze landlords of Mount Lebanon. The Shihabs became the paramount force in Mount Lebanon's social and political configuration, as they were the supreme landlords of the area and the principal intermediaries between the local sheikhs and the Ottoman authorities. This arrangement was embraced by the Ottoman governors of Sidon, Tripoli and Damascus. In addition to Mount Lebanon, the Shihabs exercised influence and maintained alliances with the various local powers of the mountains environs, such as with the Shia Muslim clans of Jabal Amal and the Bekaa Valley, the Maronite-dominated countryside of Tripoli, and the Ottoman administrators of the port cities of Sidon, Beirut and Tripoli. Brace yourself for an enlightening exploration of reign of Mulham as we dive into its profound implications. Emir Haydar died in 1732 and was succeeded by his eldest son, Mulham. One of Emir Mulham's early actions was a punitive expedition against the Whale clan of Jabal Amal. The Whale kinsmen had painted their horses' tails green in celebration of Emir Haydar's death. Emir Haydar's relations with the Whale clan had been poor, and Emir Mulham took it as a grave insult. In the ensuing campaign, the Wazi Sheikh, Nasif al-Nasser, was captured, albeit briefly. Emir Mulham had the support of Sidon's governor in his actions in Jabal Amal. Beginning in the Uz, a new factionalism developed among the Druze clans. One faction was led by the Jumblat clan and was known as the Jumblati faction, while the Imad, Tawhak and Abd al-Malik clans formed the Imad-led Yozbak faction. Thus Qazi-Yamani politics had been replaced with the Jumblati-Yozbaki rivalry. In 1748, Emir Mulham, under the orders of the governor of Damascus, burned properties belonging to the Tawhak and Abd al-Malik clans as punishment for the Yozbaki harboring of a fugitive from Damascus Islet. Afterward, Emir Mulham compensated the Tawhaks. In 1749, he succeeded in adding the tax farm of Beirut to his domain, after persuading Sidon's governor to transfer the tax farm. He accomplished this by having the Tawak clan raid the city and demonstrate the ineffectiveness of its deputy governor. Now, let's shift our perspective and explore power struggle for the emirate through a fresh lens, unlocking new perspectives. Emir Mulhim became ill and was forced to resign in 1753 by his brothers, Emirs Mansa and Ahmad, who were backed by the Druze sheikhs. Emir Mulhim retired in Beirut, but he and his son Qasim attempted to wrest back control of the emirate using his relationship with an imperial official. They were unsuccessful and Emir Mulhim died in 1759. The following year, Emir Qasim was appointed in place of Emir Mansa by the governor of Sidon. However, soon after, Emirs Mansa and Ahmad bribed the governor and regained the Shihabi tax farm. Relations between the brothers soured as each sought paramountcy. Emir Ahmad rallied the support of the Yazbaki Druze, and was able to briefly oust Emir Mansa from the Shihabi headquarters in Dar al-Kama. Emir Mansa, meanwhile, relied on the Jumbati faction and the governor of Sidon, who mobilized his troops in Beirut in support of Emir Mansa. With this support, Emir Mansa retook Dar al-Kama and Emir Ahmad fled. Sheikh Ali Jumbat and Sheikh Yazbakimid managed to reconcile Emirs Ahmad and Mansa, with the former relinquishing his claim on the emirate and was permitted to reside in Dar al-Kama. Another son of Emir Mulhim, Emir Yusuf, had backed Emir Ahmad in his struggle and had his properties in Chauf confiscated by Emir Mansa. Emir Yusuf, who was raised as a Maronite Catholic but publicly presented himself as a Sunni Muslim, gained protection from Sheikh Ali Jumbat in Maukara, and the latter attempted to reconcile Emir Yusuf with his uncle. Emir Mansa declined Sheikh Ali's mediation. Saad al-Khoury, Emir Yusuf's Mudaba manager, managed to persuade Sheikh Ali to withdraw his backing of Emir Mansa, while Emir Yusuf gained the support of Uthman Pasha al-Kurji, the governor of Damascus. The latter directed his son Mehmed Pasha al-Kurji, governor of Tripoli, to transfer the tax farms of Byblos and Batram to Emir Yusuf in 1764. With the latter two tax farms, Emir Yusuf formed a power base in Tripoli's hinterland. Under al-Khoury's guidance and with Druze allies from Chauf, Emir Yusuf led a campaign against the Hamid sheikhs in support of the Maronite clans of Dodda, Kerem and Dar and Maronite and Sunni Muslim peasants who, since 1759, were all revolting against the Hamid clan. Emir Yusuf defeated the Hamid sheikhs and appropriated their tax farms. This not only empowered Emir Yusuf in his conflict with Emir Mansa, but it also initiated Shihabi patronage over the Maronite bishops and monks who had resented Khazan influence over church affairs and been patronized by the Hamid sheikhs, the Shihab clan's erstwhile allies. Get ready to immerse yourself in the world of reign of Yusuf as we examine its impact and relevance. In 1770, Emir Mansa resigned in favor of Emir Yusuf after being compelled to step down by the Druze sheikhs. The transition was held at the village of Barauk, where the Shihabi emirs, Druze sheikhs and religious leaders met and drew up a petition to the governors of Damascus and Sidon, confirming Emir Yusuf's ascendancy. Emir Mansa's resignation was precipitated by his alliance with Sheikh Zahir al-Umar, the Zaydani strongman of northern Palestine, and Sheikh Nasif al-Nasr of Jabal Amal in their revolt against the Ottoman governors of Syria. Sheikh Zahir and the forces of Ali Bey al-Kabar of Egypt had occupied Damascus, but withdrew after Ali Bey's leading commander, Abu al-Dahab, who was bribed by the Ottomans. Their defeat by the Ottomans made Emir Mansa a liability to the Druze sheikhs vis-a-vis their relations with the Ottoman authorities, so they decided to depose him. Emir Yusuf cultivated ties with Uthman Pasha and his sons in Tripoli and Sidon, and with their backing, sought to challenge the autonomous power of Sheikhs Zahir and Nasif. However, Emir Yusuf experienced a series of major setbacks in his cause in 1771. His ally, Uthman Pasha, was routed in the Battle of Lake Hua by Sheikh Zahir's forces. Afterward, Emir Yusuf's large Druze force from Wadi al-Taim and Chauf was routed by Sheikh Nasif's Shir cavalrymen at Nabai. Druze casualties during the battle amounted to some 1,500 killed, a loss similar to that suffered by the Yemeni coalition at Ain Dara. Furthermore, the forces of Sheikhs Zahir and Nasif captured the town of Sidon after Sheikh Ali Jumblat withdrew. Emir Yusuf's forces were again routed when they attempted to oust Sheikhs Zahir and Nasif, who had key backing from the Russian fleet, which bombarded Emir Yusuf's camp. Othman Pasha, seeking to prevent Beirut's fall to Sheikh Zahir, appointed Ahmad Pasha al-Lotsa, who was formerly in Emir Yusuf's service, as garrison commander of the city. Emir Yusuf, as tax farmer of Beirut, agreed to the appointment and declined a bounty on al-Lotsa by Abu al-Dahab. Al-Lotsa was wanted by the Mamluk strongmen of Ottoman Egypt. However, al-Lotsa soon began acting independently after organizing the fortifications of Beirut, and Emir Yusuf appealed to Sheikh Zahir through Emir Mansur's liaising to request Russian bombardment of Beirut and oust al-Lotsa. Sheikh Zahir and the Russians acceded to Emir Yusuf's request after a large bribe was paid to them. After a 4 months siege, al-Lotsa withdrew from Beirut in 1772, and Emir Yusuf penalized his Uzbeki allies, Sheikhs Abd al-Salam Ahmed and Hussein Talak, to compensate for the bribe he paid to the Russians. The following year, Emir Yusuf's brother, Emir Syed Ahmad, took control of Kabylias and robbed a group of Damascene merchants passing through the village. Emir Yusuf subsequently captured Kabylias from his brother and was transferred the tax farm for the Bekaa Valley by the governor of Damascus, Muhammad Pasha al-Azm. In 1775, Sheikh Zahir was defeated and killed in an Ottoman campaign, and al-Lotsa was installed in Sheikh Zahir's Acre headquarters, and soon after was appointed governor of Sidon. Among al-Lotsa's principal goals was to centralize authority in Sidon Islet and assert control over the Shihabi Emirate in Mount Lebanon. To that end, he succeeded in ousting Emir Yusuf from Beirut and removing it from the Shihabi tax farm. Moreover, al-Lotsa took advantage and manipulated divisions among the Shihab emirs in order to break up the Shihabi Emirate into weaker entities that he could more easily exploit for revenue. In 1778 he agreed to sell the Chauf tax farm to Emir Yusuf's brothers, Emirs Syed Ahmad and Effendi, after the latter two gained the support of the Jumblat and Naked clans. Emir Yusuf's ally Sheikh Ali Jumblat died that year. Emir Yusuf, thereafter, based himself in Gaza and mobilized the support of his Sunni Muslim allies, the Rod and Mirzabi clans from Mecca. Al-Lotsa restored the Chauf to Emir Yusuf after he paid a large bribe, but his brothers again challenged him 1780. That time they mobilized the support of both the Jumblati and Uzbeki factions, but their attempt to kill Sod al-Khoury failed, and Effendi was killed. In addition, Emir Yusuf paid Al-Lotsa to loan him troops, bribed the Uzbeki faction to defect from his side Ahmad's forces, and once again secured control of the Shihabi Emirate. Get ready for a captivating exploration as we unravel the layers of reign of Bashir I and their profound significance. The most prominent among the Shihabi emirs was Emir Bashir Shihab II, who was comparable to Fakhr ad-Din II. His ability as a statesman was first tested in 1799, when Napoleon besieged Acre, a well-fortified coastal city in Palestine, about 40 kilometers south of Tyre. Both Napoleon and Ahmad Pasha al-Lotsa, the governor of Sidon, requested assistance from Bashir, who remained neutral, declining to assist either combatant. Unable to conquer Acre, Napoleon returned to Egypt, and the death of al-Lotsa in 1804 removed Bashir's principal opponent in the area. When Bashir I decided to break away from the Ottoman Empire, he allied himself with Muhammad Ali Pasha, the founder of modern Egypt, and assisted Muhammad Ali's son, Ibrahim Pasha, in another siege of Acre. This siege lasted 7 months, the city falling on May 27, 1832. The Egyptian army, with assistance from Bashir's troops, also attacked and conquered Damascus on June 14, 1832. The reign of Bashir I saw an economic shift in the mountain regions from a feudal to a cash crop system, in which Beiruti merchants, largely Sunni and Christian, loaned money to peasants, freeing them from dependence on their feudal mountain lords and contributing to the development of a handicraft economy with the growing specialization of agriculture. In 1840, four of the principal European powers, Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, opposing the pro-Egyptian policy of the French, signed the London Treaty with the Sublime Porte, the Ottoman ruler, on July 15, 1840. According to the terms of this treaty, Muhammad Ali was asked to lead Syria. When he rejected this request, Ottoman and British troops landed on the Lebanese coast on September 10, 1840. Faced with this combined force, Muhammad Ali retreated, and on October 14, 1840, Bashir I surrendered to the British and went into exile. Bashir Shihabs I was then appointed. On January 13, 1842, the Sultan deposed Bashir I and appointed Omar Pasha as governor of Mount Lebanon. This event marked the end of the rule of the Shihabs. Let's now turn our attention to Lebanon under Egyptian occupation and examine its role within the larger context. After the failure to put down the insurrection in some of the Greek provinces of the Ottoman Empire due to the intervention of European powers sinking his naval fleet at the Battle of Navarino, the warrior of Egypt, Muhammad Ali, sought the province of Syria. Muhammad Ali believed that Syria was promised as a prize for helping the Greeks, but Sultan Mahmud disagreed and only appointed him the Pashalik of Crete. Muhammad Ali raised an army under his son Ibrahim Pasha to occupy the province and bring it under Egyptian control. Bashir I had sought refuge in Egypt during the aforementioned troubled times in Lebanon from 1821 to 1822 and had become an ally of Muhammad Ali. Thus his help was sought to help secure Egyptian rule in the province. During the occupation, Ibrahim Pasha and Bashir I enacted high taxes, eventually producing resistance, and Bashir I's provision of Christian forces in battles against the Druze may have served as a source of future sectarian tensions. Bashir I had previously attempted to not appear as favoring the Maronites to the degree that he was required to under the Egyptian occupation. However, as his help was required to hold the territory, Muhammad Ali was insistent that he provide forces to his son, even threatening Bashir I personally when he appeared to be hesitating in bringing his soldiers. The occupation also introduced social measures that raised the legal rights of Christians in the area and imposed conscription and disarmament. As we progress, let's shine a spotlight on 1840 conflict in Mount Lebanon and examine its intricate interplay within our topic. The relationship between the Druze and Christians has been characterized by harmony and peaceful coexistence, with amicable relations between the two groups prevailing throughout history. On 3 September 1840, Bashir I was appointed emir of Mount Lebanon by the Ottoman Sultan. Geographically, Mount Lebanon represents the central part of present-day Lebanon, which historically has had a Christian majority. Greater Lebanon, on the other hand, created at the expense of Greater Syria, was formally constituted under the League of Nations mandate granted to France in 1920 and includes the Beek Valley, Beirut, southern Lebanon up to the border with modern Israel, and northern Lebanon up to the border with Syria. In practice, the terms Lebanon and Mount Lebanon tend to be used interchangeably by historians until the formal establishment of the mandate. Bitter conflicts between Maronites and Druze, which had been simmering under Ibrahim Pasha's rule, resurfaced under the new emir. Hence, the Sultan deposed Bashir I on 13 January 1842 and appointed Omar Pasha as governor of Mount Lebanon. This appointment, however, created more problems than it solved. In Mount Lebanon, France and Britain formed relationships with Maronite and Druze leaders respectively. While the Maronite and Druze communities remained subordinate to the House of Osman, they considered France and Britain to be their protectors. European powers took an Orientalist perspective to understand the dynamics in Mount Lebanon. British dispatches show that they incorrectly understood disputes between communities as stemming from tribal roots, without rational, which was a continuity of an ancestral conflict between the two groups. The French and British assumed that the Ottoman Empire was supporting and promoting Islamic animosity towards Christians. According to them, by creating conflict between Druze and Maronite communities, the Ottoman Empire could increase its dominance over the hinterland. However, the Ottoman Empire was struggling to control Mount Lebanon. Britain and France aimed to separate it into two provinces, one which was Druze territory and the other which was Maronite territory. On 7 December 1842, the Sultan adopted the proposal and asked Asad Pasha, the governor-wali of Beirut, to divide the region, known as Mount Lebanon, into two districts, a northern district under a Christian deputy governor and a southern district under a Druze deputy governor. This arrangement came to be known as the double Qimqamat. Both officials were to be responsible to the governor of Sidon, who resided in Beirut. The Beirut-Damascus highway was the dividing line between the two districts. This partition raised tensions because Druze lived in Maronite territory and Maronites lived in Druze territory. At the same time, the Maronites and Druze communities fought for dominance in Mount Lebanon. Animosities between the religious sects increased, nurtured by outside powers. The French, for example, supported the Maronites, while the British supported the Druze, and the Ottomans fomented strife to increase their control. Not surprisingly, these tensions led to conflict between Christians and Druze as early as May 1845. Consequently, the European powers requested that the Ottoman Sultan establish order in Lebanon, and he attempted to do so by establishing a Majlis council in each of the districts. Each Majlis was composed of members who represented the different religious communities and was intended to assist the deputy governor. This system failed to keep order when the peasants of Kesawan, overburdened by heavy taxes, rebelled against the feudal practices that prevailed in Mount Lebanon. In 1858, Tanias Shahind and Abu Samragan, both Maronite peasant leaders, demanded that the feudal class abolish its privileges. When this demand was refused, the poor peasants revolted against the sheikhs of Mount Lebanon, pillaging the sheikhs' land and burning their homes. Let's transition to Mount Lebanon Mutasarrifate and uncover its significance. The division of Lebanon into different religious communities mostly dissatisfied the Druze minority, complaining about the lack of political and economic privileges. These factors and other factors led into violent religious conflicts, eventually leading to the massacre of about 11 Maronites and the displacement of 100 as well as Greek Orthodox and Greek Catholics in 1860, creating an opportunity for European powers to intervene in the region. When the news of the massacres reached Europe, especially France was horrified and called for action to stop the massacre of the innocent Christians. A series of international conventions known as the Reglement Organique were held. In July 1860, a conference in the name of humanity was held in Paris composed of France, Britain, Austria, Prussia, Russia and the Ottoman Empire. A protocol was adopted that provided for 12 soldiers from European countries, 6,000 of which French, to be dispatched to the region. The mandate was to punish the guilty, secure reparations for the Christian losses and suggest reforms that would ensure order and security. However, Fuad Pasha, the Ottoman official tasked with restoring order on Ottoman behalf, was able to repress the violence before the arrival of the European forces. On 5 October 1860, the participating nations reached an agreement on regional reforms. A new system of autonomy was found, known as the Mount Lebanon Mutasarrif Governorate. Mount Lebanon was separated from Syria and gained new autonomy under a non-Lebanese Christian Mutasarrif governor supported by an administrative council composed of 12 Lebanese locals, consisting out of members from the Lebanese religious communities Druze, Greek Orthodox, Maronites, Greek Catholic, Sunni and Shia. Mount Lebanon enjoyed now privileges not granted to other bordering districts in the region. The Mutasarrifia did not pay taxes to the central government, inhabitants were exempted from military service, law enforcement consisted of and was controlled by locals only, except for the governor. Every official was a local and the official language of the administration was Arabic. However, Mount Lebanon had little arable lands. Now that the Mutasarrifia became more autonomous, it became dependent on neighboring districts for food supplies, means of living, and largely depended on Beirut's port for imports and exports, and ideals to annex neighboring districts emerged. These neighboring regions that used to be under Shihabi rule together with Mount Lebanon desired to enjoy the similar rights to the Mutasarrifiyya, keeping the Mutasarrifiyya and the effect it had on neighboring regions under control. In 1864, the Ottoman Empire decided to join the provinces of Damascus and Say, the seat of which was Beirut, into one province of Syria, uniting the districts bordering Mount Lebanon. In 1866, Mehmed Rashid Paya was appointed governor of Syria. During his tenure, he applied many reform measures to counterbalance the effect the establishment of the Mutasarrifiyya had on the region. It was only after World War I that the French agreed to attach the adjacent districts to Mount Lebanon and constitute the state of Greater Lebanon. Restricted mainly to the mountains by the Mutasarrifiyya district governed by a Mutasarrif arrangement and unable to make a living, many Lebanese Christians emigrated to Egypt and other parts of Africa and to North America, South America, and East Asia. Remittances from these Lebanese emigrants sent to their relatives in Lebanon has continued to supplement the Lebanese economy to this day. In addition to being a center of commercial and religious activity, Lebanon became an intellectual center in the second half of the 19th century. Foreign missionaries established schools throughout the country, with Beirut as the center of this renaissance. The American University of Beirut was founded in 1866, followed by the French St. Joseph's University in 1875. An intellectual guild that was formed at the same time gave new life to Arabic literature, which had stagnated under the Ottoman Empire. This new intellectual era was also marked by the appearance of numerous publications and by a highly prolific press. The period was also marked by increased political activity. The harsh rule of Abdul Hamid I prompted the Arab nationalists, both Christians and Muslims, in Beirut and Damascus to organize into clandestine political groups and parties. The Lebanese, however, had difficulties in deciding the best political course to advocate. Many Lebanese Christians were apprehensive of Turkish pan-Islamic policies, fearing a repetition of the 1860 massacres. Some, especially the Maronites, began to contemplate secession rather than the reform of the Ottoman Empire. Others, particularly the Greek Orthodox, advocated an independent Syria with Lebanon as a separate province within it, so as to avoid Maronite rule. A number of Lebanese Muslims, on the other hand, sought not to liberalize the Ottoman regime but to maintain it, as Sunni Muslims particularly liked to be identified with the Caliphate. The Shias and Druze, however, fearing minority status in a Turkish state, tended to favor an independent Lebanon or a continuation of the status quo. Yusuf Bey Karam, a Lebanese nationalist, played an influential role in Lebanon's independence during this era. Originally, the Arab reformist groups hoped their nationalist aims would be supported by the Young Turks, who had staged a revolution in. Unfortunately, after seizing power, the Young Turks became increasingly repressive and nationalistic. They abandoned many of their liberal policies because of domestic opposition and Turkey's engagement in foreign wars between 1911 and 1913. Thus, the Arab nationalists could not count on the support of the Young Turks and instead were faced with opposition by the Turkish government. Let's transition to foreign intervention in the 19th century and changing economic conditions and uncover its significance. The tensions that burst into the sectarian conflict during the years were set within the context of a fast-paced change in the established social order in the region. Under Bashir II, the agricultural economy of the Mount Lebanon region was brought into greater interdependence with the commercial economy of Beirut, altering the structure of feudal obligations and expanding the influence of cash crops. This created increased economic and political ties with France, leading to the French becoming an international patron of sorts to the Maronites of Lebanon. The links that bind France and Lebanon date back centuries, and it's hard to ascertain when France first acted in Lebanon. Historians date this connection back to the first presence of French Jesuits on Mount Lebanon following their arrival in Syria in 1831. During the first part of the 19th century, exclusive Christian identity began to emerge on Mount Lebanon, and the Maronite Church played a pivotal role in determining Lebanon's political history and the establishment of a Christian state in Lebanon in 1920. These Catholic communities ultimately established an extensive Jesuit education system in the area, with Université Saint Joseph serving as the first institution, founded in Beirut in 1875. The university exposed its students to a variety of academic subjects, which helped them develop a stronger sense of identity. To gain knowledge about their homeland, students at the university's Oriental faculty studied archaeology, philology, and history. This long process has strengthened their national identity, and those same thinkers will later demand for the country's independence. The knowledge they received in those schools, as well as the elite that was developed as a result of it, spawned the first nationalist movement. Nujaim, an educated Maronite from Juni, one of the most influential of them, was arguing for the creation of a Greater Lebanon as an independent state. Nujaim's historical and geographical arguments on Lebanon had become a foundation for some intellectuals and politicians' national ambition. It had a direct impact on Lebanon by forming an elite that later governed the country by occupying most administrative and governmental positions, as well as working as a mediator between Lebanon and France, which was the country's mandatory authority at the time. They also contributed to the media by founding newspapers and magazines such as La Revue Phoenicienne in 1919, which went on to become one of Lebanon's most influential francophone publications. This left the British to side with the Druze to the extent that a counterweight to France could be established in the region and that such tensions would not result in separatism that would threaten the integrity of the Ottoman Empire. The reforms within the Tanzimat also provided a source of increasing disagreement between Maronite and Druze populations. The European powers attempted to make sure the Tanzimat was interpreted as a mandate to protect Christians in the region and grant them great autonomy, while Druze elites interpreted the Tanzimat as restoring their traditional rights to rule the land. Foreign actions in Lebanon were dominated by European countries like as England, Germany, and France, although non-European powers such as Russia were also involved. It's their interaction with the Ottoman Empire that would lead them to operate in the Mount Lebanon during the late end of the 19th century. The Ottoman Empire's economy was deteriorating. The government was forced to seek loans from European banks in order to pay off its obligations. However, the agreements were that they had to trade with Europeans' compagnies and let them control different field or part of their territory, this including the Mount Lebanon. The railroad trade is one illustration of European countries' worldwide expansion. It originally started in 1888 when the building of Anatolian Railway leading to Baghdad was granted to German developers. Later in 1889, German and French came to an agreement and decided to equally divide the ownership of that new railroad company. This project, also known as the Baghdad Railway, later opened the way for the French Mandate. Therefore, in 1902 French firms were at the head of 5 railroads that ran throughout Greater Syria, which comprised Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Israel at the time. At the same time as the railroads were being built, the Turks acquired control of the Ottoman government and took on greater debt. This economic instability prompted them to sign a general agreement on April 9, 1914, in which France agreed to lend the Ottoman Empire 800 million francs in exchange for the Turkish signature over the concession granted to France in 2 prior agreements signed in September 1913. These concessions included the right to construct 1790 kilometers of new railways, as well as the restoration of all privileges granted to French charities and religious organizations in Syria and Lebanon. It strengthened the French legitimacy within the country and facilitated the creation of the French Mandate later. Turning our focus to World War I and the French Mandate, let's explore its key elements. The outbreak of World War I in August 1914 brought famine to Lebanon, mainly resulting from a Turkish land blockade and confiscations. It killed an estimated third to half of the predominantly Maronite population over the next 4 years. Turkey, which had allied itself with Germany and Austria-Hungary, abolished Lebanon's semi-autonomous status and appointed Cemal Pasha, then Minister of the Navy, as the commander-in-chief of the Turkish forces in Syria, with discretionary powers. For centuries, the Turks had pursued a policy alienating the majority of the non-Turkish subjects of the empire. The diverse people from the Syrian province had become more and more aware of their own identity as non-Turks. Now that the First World War broke out, these subjects would be willing to help the enemy because of their lack of sympathy for the Turks. British and French forces effected a naval blockade of the Syrian coast, starting intelligence operations together with the French. By controlling the waters, Allies dropped and picked up spies, with the help of local shipmen facilitating the escape of spies by bringing them to the Allied warships. At night there was constant flashing of messages between the warships and spies on the coast. The intelligence operations were conducted in an obvious way, which pleased many locals, embarrassing the Turks. Pasha pursued a harsh reign, executing dozens on grounds of political activity. This politically suppressive rule led to mass executions in Beirut and Damascus on 6 May 1916. 14 inhabitants from Beirut were hanged in the public square. Since the sectarian conflict of 1860, Lebanon had not seen such acts of violence as these. The mass executions created momentum and strengthened Arab nationalism, striving for Arab political independence. The Turkish army also cut down trees for wood to fuel trains or for military purposes. 6 May is a commemoration day known as Martyrs' Day. Martyrs Square in Beirut is named after this day. The end of Ottoman rule in Lebanon began in September 1918 when French forces landed on the Lebanese coast, and the British moved into Palestine, opening the way for the liberation of Syria and Lebanon from Turkish rule. At the San Remo Conference in Italy in April 1920, the Allies gave France a mandate over Greater Syria. France then appointed General Henry Gourad to implement the mandate provisions. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your support and I'll see you in the next video.